And I am really grateful to be here with you tonight, a group of amazing leaders and organizers and strategists. You are a sight for sore eyes, even as weary as I am of the Zoom world. And of course, I'm grateful to see my AFSCME family from right there at Harvard and in Massachusetts and New York and Connecticut and Washington State. I've seen all of those AFSCME family members. If you're from another state that I missed, unmute yourself and holler. But it's great to be with all of you. And of course, with our AFSCME siblings and union family from all over the globe. And I always enjoy being with the Harvard Labor Life Program team. We have a fund that lives at Harvard called the WRF Fund that supported some of you in the program. And it's a great way that we engage with Harvard in supporting research and leadership development for the public sector labor movement. So I'm going to get right to it. I just want to say a few things about opportunities that are before us right now. And for once, we have many, which is great. And part of the reason we have them is because we worked really hard to change the Constitution of Congress and to get a different administration. And I see some of my friends from the virtual phone banks that we ran, not only in the fall, but in January for the special election in Georgia. And when we elected those last two pro-worker senators from Georgia in January, when Georgians did, we really changed what was possible in this country. We still got steep hills, but we have opportunities to make progress for workers' rights, for racial justice, for economic equality at the national level. And it reminds me of something that I learned in a classroom about leadership development, which is they often talk in leadership development courses about these aspects of leadership being characteristics, what you bring, your character, and capabilities, this the knowledge that you gain, that you bring to your leadership role. But there's a third factor in leadership, which is context. And I think we're seeing that right now, that context shapes leadership. And the Biden-Harris administration seems quite clear on the context. And that is a good thing. So we've got an opportunity to make change at the federal level, and we have an opportunity to grow our movement. And we've really got to focus on that. So let me say a few words about both of those things. In terms of federal policy, we really have to never forget the lessons of this year when a global crisis hit, and it was healthcare and public sector and public service workers who saved lives, who gave of themselves, and who taught us all what's at stake and what it means to be essential. I know school employees who became food bank operators. I know nurses who became conduits for children or grandchildren to speak to a dying parent or grandparent who they could not see in the hospital. I know sanitation workers who became public health guardians. And I know library workers who became contract tracers during this pandemic. So we saw the need to fund the front lines. We ran an incredible campaign where we really turned up the heat to make sure that we got robust aid to cities, townships, states, tribal governments, counties, schools through the American Rescue Plan. It was a huge win, and it's having a direct impact on bargaining outcomes, on services to communities, and on working folks. And we have a great website, rescue.afscme.org, where you can plug in your zip code and see how it affects your community. So this is no time to go back. The jobs plan and the family plan that the administration has outlined are great opportunities to continue to push back against austerity and to reimagine and rebuild. And obviously we're in the trenches trying to shape that legislation and make sure that it does right by working people and public services and healthcare in this country. And I think the most important thing we got to hang on to in talking about this is that these ideas and really policy agendas that have been framed in the jobs plan and the families plan have bipartisan support everywhere outside the halls of Congress. So we have to keep talking about them as bipartisan measures because that's what they are. There's huge support in general, but also among Republicans. And the gender gap that has been present in elections is present in terms of support for this administration. There's a 10-point gap between men and women in terms of support for the Biden-Harris administration. About 2/3 of women support this administration in general, voters. Second big opportunity we have is to grow our movement. And to make this point, I just want to ask, Alita, do you have that map and are you able to show that to folks as I talk about what's happening for public sector workers in this country?
Yes, 1 second.
Thank you. I just want to really, first, there we go. I want to really point to our opportunity to grow by making sure that we're all clear what the state of collective bargaining is for public sector workers in the US. This is a map that shows the state of rights for public sector workers. The green states have comprehensive collective bargaining rights. The states that are present on this in this group are up in those green states. The brown or orange states have partial, including the one where I live, Maryland, where, believe it or not, a group of county employees just south of Washington, D.C. just won the right to organize a union for the first time. This is the public works and roads crew workers in Charles County, Maryland. And they had to pass a piece of legislation through the state of Maryland to get the right to organize. Now they've got to win representation rights through an election or a card check, and then they have to negotiate a contract, a 3-part fight in the state of Maryland in the year 2021. Well, guess what? That's true also in all of those blue states where there is limited or no collective bargaining. Now we're starting to turn that around in places like Virginia, where our union and the firefighters, and I know there's some IAFF leaders on the call, we partnered just recently in the city of Alexandria, where because of state legislation that was passed last year, after 40 years where collective bargaining was not just not enabled for public sector workers, it was banned. So if you're a teacher, a city worker, a county worker, or a school employee, a state employee, you were not allowed to bargain with your employer by law. And that was shifted slightly, cracked the door open with a piece of legislation that enabled cities and school boards to enable their employees to bargain. So the city of Alexandria on May Day became the first to pass legislation after we had to really fight them, the firefighters, and ask me to get full scope collective bargaining. They wanted it to only be wages and benefits. So we want to bargain for the common good. As you all know, we believe, of course, that anytime public sector workers can bargain, they're bargaining for their communities, because that's the passion that public sector workers have. We were able to expand that scope of bargaining. So that will hopefully be a model for other cities. And then we can go back to the legislature for full scope collective bargaining for all public workers in the state of Virginia. Nevada is a place where, because we got a pro-worker legislature and governor a couple of years ago, state employees just got their first contract through a real fight to pass legislation, then organize a union, then fight and win a collective bargaining agreement. 3 steps for public sector workers because they're excluded from our National Labor Relations Act. So we're trying to change that by passing the Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act. It's about to be introduced in the House. Once it is, we can have a joint fight for the PRO Act, which, as you know, is a bill that will make the playing field more level for private sector workers who right now have to crawl across broken glass to form a union because of the ways that employers either break the law or intimidate and bully workers in ways that are within their legal rights. And the PRO Act is designed to change that and to level the playing field. The Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act is a crucial complement to that bill because, as I said, private labor law, the right to organize in this country that was created through the National Labor Relations Act excludes lots of categories of workers, including public sector workers. So we've got to talk about the fact that we need democracy in the workplace. We need to enable a voice on the job and power at work for public employees in most of the country, almost half of the country, I should say. And we are going to be fighting hard for these two pieces of legislation. You won't be surprised to hear we have a few key targets. So if you have family or friends in Virginia and Arizona, those are the senators who are the holdouts on the PRO Act. The same group is going to be a challenge on the Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act. Kelly and Sinema in Arizona, Warner in Virginia, Manchin in West Virginia, and King in Maine. But we've got to be talking to legislators from every state to thank them if they're with us, to remind them what's at stake, and to remind them that this is a bipartisan workers' rights agenda for the whole labor movement. So let me stop there and hand it over to my colleague and brother from Canada, and hopefully we'll have time for some conversation.